Hello and welcome to So Many Games, independent video game coverage from a passionate group of people. Please check out everything we do at somanygames.co.uk. My name is Jason, and for episode 13 of the podcast, we feature an interview with Tom Eastman, co-founder of Trinket Studios, who are the developers behind Battle Chef Brigade and the recently released Battlesuit Aces. I've been wanting to talk to Tom about his games, especially after wrapping up Battlesuit Aces, as he and the team seem to have a great way to approach their game ideas, and we delve into that, the process of developing Battlesuit Aces, its characters, and much more in this episode's interview. But before we jump into that conversation, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. First up, I would just like to mention our Discord. We are slowly building up a lovely little community over in our server, and I'd like to say thanks to everyone that's joined in the last month. We've kickstarted a couple of community-based events, including our Year in Gaming, where we all share a spreadsheet on the games we've been playing throughout the year. We're also running a semi-regular bracket challenge, and just starting now, a monthly game club where you choose the short game for us to play in that particular month. Of course, plenty of gaming chat is also to be found. We would love to say hello and for you to be a part of the So Many Games community. So if you fancy being a part of anything I just mentioned, or just to chat games with us, you can find a link in the show description. And I would also just like to mention our Patreon. If you would like to support independent video game coverage, this would be the best way to do it. We have 3 tiers for you to consider, starting from just £1. We have plenty to check out, including exclusive articles, early access to our work, and a slot on our Patreon wall on our website. If you join our top tier, I'll even send you a random Steam code your way every single month. And we would just like to take this moment to welcome in our latest patron, Shy Guy, to the crew, who used our 7-day free trial of the Gigabyte tier, which you can do right now if you're curious on our offerings. A massive thank you goes out to our current patrons, John, Ruz, Cami, Keris, Antonia, and Shy Guy. You guys rule, and we are incredibly lucky to have your support. Check out patreon.com/so-many-games to see everything we have to offer. A link can also be found in the show description. If supporting us monetarily isn't right for you right now, and you'd still like to help, then a glorious 5-star rating and review would be amazing. And tell anyone you think who would be interested in our work. We would really appreciate it. Okay, with all that said, it's time to join up with Tom and our chat on Battlesuit Aces.
Tom Eastman. I'm 1/3 of Trinket Studios founding team. I'm sort of a programmer by trade, but I was one of those people who always knew they wanted to make games. So I studied computer science and interned at some game companies, Garage Games, and then Wide Load Games, where I started full time after college. And a month after I got there, they were bought by Disney. And then 3 years later, we couldn't handle making Marvel mobile games forever, and I was joined in escaping with by Ben Perez and Eric Wong. Ben is an awesome programmer, and Eric is an incredible artist, and we formed Trinket Studios back in, 2012. And we kicked things off with 2 mobile games, and then Battle Chef Brigade, and then Battlesuit Aces.
It's quite the journey.
Yeah, there was a lot of years in there and a lot of decisions, but when I put it like that, it sounds very reasonable, and maybe we should have done more games by now.
Yeah, exactly. What have you been doing, Tom? Come on, chop. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what Battlesuit Aces is and what they can expect from playing the game?
At its core, Battlesuit Aces is sort of a story-rich deck builder, and that means you sort of take the roguelite deck builder genre that's pretty popular now, started with like Slay the Spire, and you take out the roguelite portion and you put in a lot of story, and that story is the whole wrapper is sort of mecha anime. So all your cards are characters, the pilots of their own mechs, these battle suits, and you collect crew members and pilots over the course of the journey. You're choosing who you're recruiting from different factions, and you use them in sort of like an anime episode story missions. You're choosing which ones to take on. A lot of times they feature certain pilots, and the game is sort of like 2 seasons of an anime, all presented as a visual novel with a lot of card battling combat.
And I tell you, Tom, I'm very grateful you took all the roguelike stuff out. It's getting a bit tiring for me personally. Everything seems to be roguelike or roguelite, especially deck builders at the moment. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
we have a tendency to not want to make anything that seems too normal. Like we want to really explore some of these things. And early on, we took a lot of inspiration from Slay the Spire and some other roguelite deck builders, and then trying to figure out like how to turn those into a narrative game was really fun. Like how to link up like a character driven narrative with like deck builder format, and where like you're making mechanical choices in battle, and can those influence the narrative and vice versa. And it was like a really fun challenge. We like fun challenges even when they're painful and difficult. You're sort of wandering the forest, the unknown sometimes for a while.
Yeah, but it must be a good feeling when you find the right path and get to the end.
Absolutely. That's, I guess, what makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. I guess when you're playing a game and you're battling that one of the bosses over and over and over again. Like in Silksong, and but then you finally defeat it, and that wave of euphoria of happiness. I'm assuming is probably the same kind of thing for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Eric, one of our writers, he played this Battlesuit Aces quite recently and absolutely fell in love with it. So when I told him, he said, I need to send you some questions so I can ask Tom. So throughout the interview, I've got a few questions from Eric that I've kind of scattered in around my questions. We've got one of Eric's questions right now. And he wanted to know how you went from Battle Chef Brigade to Battlesuit Aces. What inspired you to create a card game? Did the genre pivot create any unique challenges for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we sure thought a lot about. The easiest answer is that we're sort of responding to the trauma of making Battle Chef Brigade, specifically the animation pipeline. So in Battle Chef Brigade, all the characters can run around, they do combat stuff, and then they also do cooking stuff. And there are a lot of characters, and they're all hand animated. And so by the end of that project, for instance, doing a chef like Ziggy or Thrash, there were about 6 people involved in that process. Eric, our art director, would be doing key poses, but then it would go to someone doing line art or animating, like in Flash, in a very rough way, and then line art, and then coloring. And like that was a very complicated, somewhat painful process. And we thought, Eric, it would be so great if you didn't have to manage all those people. And we did something simpler. Cards are so convenient because they're just single illustrations.
Yeah.
Now, in retrospect, we see that maybe wasn't totally, we didn't solve one problem, we just made a different problem.
Right.
Instead of having like 10 frames of a run cycle where each frame is similar to each other, it's painful in its own way, but then instead we replaced that with 10 independent, totally unique illustrations. So we didn't necessarily like achieve our goal, but that was a big goal, was to try to make a smaller game. We were thinking that visual novel would let us communicate a story really clearly with characters, which has always been our big thing. Eric is a phenomenal character designer and writer. So we wanted to have characters, but we wanted to simplify a little bit from Battle Chef Brigade, or focus more on sort of a comic booky anime manga style of presentation with illustrations. And we thought cards would be simpler. We also thought, we just made a fantasy game, let's try making a sci-fi game. And especially during the pandemic, we watched a lot of Star Trek. So there was a lot of Star Trek influence coming into the game, or into our brainstorm as we were prototyping new ideas. So it was in our minds, it was like an easy, like, we're going to respond to the things we didn't like about the Battle Chef Brigade development process to make something fresh. Though there are a lot of links as well. The town in Battle Chef Brigade Town, is very much represented in the what we call the dollhouse, but the ship, the Zephyr in Battlesuit Aces. You play an episode, and then you have a pacing break where you're doing puzzles or that reinforce the mechanics or let you explore cards you haven't played with too much, and then do like bounties. They're similar to the hunting jobs. Like there's basically a hunter's guild in both games. and really hang out with the characters. You're not under the pressure of a timed challenge or the pressure of like winning or losing a battle. You get time to adjust your deck, install different mods in the battle suits, and sort of prepare for the next episode.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that little break that you gave us in between the fights. It was a nice break, you know, and you could get to know the characters a bit more. You could enjoy the upgrades that you'd managed to unlock and purchase, and just, you know, take a breather, you know, and you know, before the next battle. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned Star Trek, because like I've been quite a big Star Trek fan in my lifetime. So playing through Battlesuit Aces, and I was like, this has to have been inspired in some way or another by Star Trek. So I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was my next question. So
yeah, and I think early on we did a lot of prototyping for the mechanics and a lot of prototyping for like how to tell a story. And early on we tried some episodes that really had an A and B plot, very much like a Star Trek episode. Like this away team is down on the planet's surface doing something and figuring out some problem, but then on the ship, like these other characters are dealing with something. And there are still a couple episodes, some of the bigger episodes in Battlesuit Aces have that, but our early tests were like, okay, this is too confusing for people. Like, you don't want to set up a battle here and then swap back to some other characters doing something. Like, they all need to be more clearly connected for the player to understand, like, what's going on? What am I fighting for? Because it was really important that we had all the campaign battles are really like set up for that battle. They're custom, bespoke, whatever. And so if you're lost about which characters are involved or who's available or what, like, am I fighting this enemy from that plot or am I fighting the other team's problem, that got confusing. So we tried to narrow it down more so the player could understand what they're doing in each battle and why they're fighting.
Like during the playthrough, like you have moments where you can choose to do a mission for specific characters. Is that how that was born from that?
Yeah, we really wanted it to, like I was saying about sort of like we wanted to be character driven, and that meant that we really wanted to be able to explore, like, let the player choose who to get to know better. And you get to do that by like who you upgrade will affect things and whose crew missions you unlock and do affect things. But we're always looking for chances. You'd be like, I choose you, Pikachu character. There was also a bit of for a while, some of our prototyping was, like I was saying, more roguelite-y. And so making something replayable was somewhat important. I think we thought it was more important than it should be because the game is like 20 hours long for some people, but it was a much bigger than Battleship Brigade. So replayability maybe shouldn't have been too important, but some of the legacy of that inspiration was still there. We're like, you're not going to be able to see every single piece of content in a single run. We want you to focus like on what characters, what factions in this run you're going to have a good time with and make those synergies work. And then you can play it again and make a totally different deck with totally different characters.
Yeah, there was a lot of instances when I got to the point where I could choose different crew missions, and I was kind of cursing under my breath a little bit because I just didn't know which one to choose. It was too hard. There's so many interesting ones to choose from, and yeah, it was a tough choice, Tom. So thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
But obviously, you say Star Trek's a big inspiration for Battlesuit Aces. Is there any other inspirations that you took?
Yeah, we're sort of there's obviously a sort of mecha anime set of inspirations like Gundam broadly, Gurren Lagann, Eureka 7. I mean, and Cowboy Bebop is, but the sort of like ensemble casts you see in some of these are just like cool sci-fi stuff. And then there sci-fi shows in general with ensemble casts like Star Trek, but also Stargate and Firefly were big ones where you want to just hang out with your fun buddies. They're sort of like a found family on a ship. There's maybe some conflict between them, but it's not about them all like the villain isn't on your ship. The villain is out there and you're all facing that danger together and bonding over it and getting to know each other.
I appreciate the Firefly drop. That was great.
Oh yeah.
Eric would like to know about the artwork of the game, because throughout it varies from high fidelity anime to more sketchbook style in some of the cutscenes. He just wondered why is that, and how did it all tie into that artistic vision for the game?
The short answer is not having the budget or time to get something so large done, and that meant a lot of times deciding whether or not we needed to bring on another artist or adjust the style. There's something that happened in Battleship Brigade 2 near the end. Not all the buildings had interior backgrounds done, and we switched them. They're all like watercolor style, whereas the rest of the game isn't as watercolory. And we had to do a similar thing of sort of like different artists are bringing their own styles, and we have that reflected in the cards and some of the items as well, where it's like this faction looks more like this, both in their inspiration and also how they're drawn, by like which artists we have involved. That is a general area where I think since launch we've upgraded some of the ones that we wish we had gotten to sooner. So it's good that like Steam, for instance, has a very long tail. Like the vast majority of players who are going to play Battlesuit Aces haven't actually played it yet. They're still coming as the game goes on discount or finds its way into all sorts of whatever free
Bundles.
key programs. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so it was a combination of trying to find it when we made. There was a point where the game had way too much content, and then we cut it in half, like in sort of the early pre-production, and we probably should have cut it more, because it's very easy to write a great episode, just write the script and think, oh, okay, it'll have like some action here and we'll do a couple illustrations, and not realize the downstream effects of that. The game is fully voiced, and so there's so much voice work that has to happen, and then there's also so many illustrations, both for just characters and their poses in the visual novel, but then there's sort of like comic book panels that show up. So there was a lot of there's a very large spreadsheet trying to track every single illustration in the game for each different purpose, and that got complicated.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. That. So is there DLC coming then if you've got half a game sitting around somewhere?
Oh, well, we don't really have half a game. It was like at the outline stage for every episode, like each episode was just a couple lines, and then we're like, I think this might be too large. There's clearly a balancing act between like how much deck builder or card battle or gameplay do you have and how much story content do you have, and that was like sort of a ever adjusting. We were trying to find that balance for a long time, and that sort of encouraged us to have some more sort of card battling content on the ship. So there's the bounties and the sim chamber, sort of like puzzles and challenges, and trying to find that balance was really hard. Trying to have the space for the characters to grow, but also have a chance for your deck to grow and get interesting.
Yeah, I never really think about that, obviously, because I guess you've got to try and please like two sets of people, haven't you? I guess because you've got to try and keep the people that are there more so for the narrative than the card battles, but people who want more card battles also need to be accounted for, I guess, don't they? So yeah, that must have been really hard.
Yeah, and that was the similar problem, I guess, with Battleship Brigade, where it was like a platform brawling game where you're collecting ingredients, and then you play like sort of a match 3. You build your own Tetris puzzle is the way we always thought about it, where you're making dishes for the judges, like the cooking portion. There's like two totally different genres, and the layer we focus on is maybe to our detriment, make each of those really strong, and then make it the characters the focus. So it's really the story and the characters that bring you through everything and make you willing to experiment.
That's really interesting. And like, was that the same for the battle mechanics? You know, was it hard to keep that balance right and kind of implement that into the story?
That was our long, painful process. For a long time, the game, we had like Heathcliff and Felix, or just Heathcliff, as like they're the mech pilots, but then your cards were actually more like guns, like just weapons that, like, say, like Felix's set of blue weapons, or for a period of time there were like guns and shields and sort of like abilities, and you would play them onto your card in response to different situations. And the game it had just a couple characters and was really focused on sort of verb cards or weapons. And it just never really felt like the kind of game that we were excited enough about. And eventually, the breakthrough was switching all the cards to be characters. And we're like, okay, these should be pilots. They should have their own battle suits. And now we see how we can be collecting these people. We can see their interactions. We can build a story, an ensemble cast around these. But during that time, we also had to figure out how to make a whole bunch of character cards feel good, how to make it feel like even in battles they're clearly synergizing and working together, and they're like friends in the narrative who can be friends in the battle and do something together. And that was a big challenge. We did a lot of paper prototyping at first, where we were playing against each other. Like one of us would act like the enemy, and that helped us nail down the energy generation system, which wouldn't work at all in a player versus player game. And that was something we had to realize. And there's a point where paper prototyping doesn't work anymore, because a single player game does not need to be balanced in the same way. It's okay if the enemies are playing a little differently. Like they can deploy more than one card on their turn, for instance. And it's okay if you find somewhat game-breaking strategies. It's about the flow of a given battle, the roller coaster of emotions that you're feeling and what decisions you're making. So we had to transition away from like a player versus player mindset as we were prototyping, once we had that energy system figured out, to something that was more fun to do as a single player game, where you can find cards that are too good, or if you find the right mods and you craft those mods, you put them on the right cards, you can make something that makes the game potentially too easy in some battles in the late game. But that's sort of fine. Like that's the terrible thing in like Hearthstone or Magic or something, but it's really fun to feel like you discovered a cool thing to do as a single player game.
That was one of the most like exhilarating parts of the actual card battles, was when you found that kind of synergy with the right players and the right characters and the right mods. And then like you would do one move and then you'd like set off a whole chain reaction. And you're like, whoa, that was really cool. And then like, I want to do that again. You know, that was a really like cool moment of the game. Like, have you seen any kind of like wild builds since the game's released? In that sense?
Our Discord community has found a whole bunch. There are some cards that I still might need to adjust because they're too good without needing to set up that Rube Goldberg machine. But Roland, for instance, and the Suitsmiths are all about mostly defensive abilities like armor and plating. And Roland's ability, his damage is affected by how much total shielding your team has, and so people can get him up into like hundreds of points of damage.
Wow.
And like those sorts of things. And there was another character, I forget which one, got up there into the hundreds as well. But you can get a lot of damage going on, and you can also I think especially with the athletes who play Starball in the game, and they have a lot of movement abilities, moving your cards around, and a lot of abilities that trigger when your other cards, when they move or their allies move, or just accumulating extra movement points for your turn. And so we see a lot of fun combos with them too, where like you move one card and that triggers a whole bunch of other stuff, and everyone to fire and get free attacks and all that.
Now I remember when that first happened, and I was my eyes were just like wide open because I wasn't expecting it. It was it was a total surprise, but it was really great to see it all just unfold in front of me. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, Eric wants to know if you can just tell us a little bit more about how the deck building was designed, what went into your decision to patch in more deck customization options after the launch.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was something that we really struggle with. So the long answer is going to involve marketing, the marketing meta on Steam. Like for a long time, like for Battleship Brigade, the main thing to do for marketing was go to conventions like PAX East and see players play and invite journalists to come play, or influencers or streamers. And they would do those things, and it was fairly straightforward. That's also where you would meet publishers. Now, a lot of that stuff has changed. A lot more like streamers need to be paid, or there just aren't as many journalists. And conventions, especially due to the pandemic, have maybe recovered to that point, but it's still a little different. There aren't as many publishers just in this economy running around offering money to indies who have a like early build at a convention. So the meta now is more like do like Steam Next Fest is really big, especially for card games. Like Steam is a clear like lead platform. Even though we released on Switch and PlayStation 5, we always kind of knew that card games really focused more on the PC audience. Um, so I totally forget the question now because I went on that ramble about the meta and marketing. Oh, that's it. Okay, so Ludonarracon is the sort of narrative Steam event put on by publisher Fellow Traveler. They're very focused on narrative games, and we decided that was going to be where our first demo was released. And that went really well. We got like all the players were really into. The demo was 2 hours long because we wanted to make sure that like we were really getting people's eyes on more of the deck building. Sort of the number of mechanics increases over the course of the first hour or two, and wanted to make sure people could see plenty, but also see like have we gotten the narrative to card battling balance right. And that demo, and then it was followed not too long after, maybe a month after, by a Steam Next Fest. We did not get a lot of feedback saying you should have more deck editing, like being able to remove cards from your deck or bench them. And our view, we had adjusted this multiple times during development, but with the sort of character first mindset, we thought characters or players are going to recruit the characters from factions that they like. They're going to go to the faction screen, they're going to read what this card is going to do, and they're going to pick the one they want. And that also brings them onto the ship so you can talk with them and they start interacting with the whole story. And with that sort of focus on characters and an ensemble cast, we thought that was really good. We don't want to have like you're going into battle and like some of your characters are just left on the ship for some reason that doesn't really make sense. We wanted it to be like you made a choice, have fun with this run. If you want to make a different choice on your next playthrough, go ahead. But what we found at launch was that we were getting way more deck build, like basically roguelite deck builder players. Like Steam was showing it to them. They would say, okay, cool. They'd start playing, they'd be having a good time and be like, when is it going to unlock a deck building? We'd say, well, you're deck building the whole time. You're adding cards, but you're not removing them. And I think that was eventually we were like, yeah, we just didn't align enough with the genre expectations and not for a really good reason. So we'll make it so that at some point, yes, you can bench characters so you can refine your deck more. We had like during development been like, this might be a problem, so we're going to adjust how you deploy your units so you get a redraw. And so we thought that you'd be able to get the cards you wanted, but those things were all sort of like a little too far from expectations that the like final launch audience had. And so we didn't think it wasn't compromising our vision to add in like the ability to sideline some characters to make your deck a little more focused. And I think like ultimately as a single player game, that's totally fine. Like it's about the player being able to find the way to play that they want and have a good time. And we were broadly like worried like, oh, you'll just make like a 6-card combo and keep playing that. But our goal as developers was make sure the enemies are presenting interesting challenges that would defeat that kind of like simplistic deck building strategy. And I think we achieved that. So like ultimately we were too worried about the same issue and address it in multiple ways, and it didn't need to be as like restrictive as we shipped with. So it was sort of a weird situation where when you're combining two genres or adjusting a genre, there are ways that you can get away from the genre and people enjoy it, like you're exploring a new twist on it. And then there's ways that be like, how dare you remove the delete button from my deck? And we got there. We just weren't sure which one it was for a while.
It was really interesting to hear that, actually, especially with adding in the swapping of the cards. Obviously, I played it a bit later after launch, so I didn't have that first version because I could swap my cards in and out. So would players just literally have like, because there are quite a lot of characters, there's a lot of cards in the game.
Yeah, the sort of dark pattern we started seeing, which we didn't expect, was once players realized that they weren't going to be able to remove a card, they just wouldn't recruit from the factions anymore. Yeah. Or they would only recruit the exact card they wanted, but not any other cards. So it was sort of like they were purposefully limiting their story enjoyment to make a simpler but stronger deck, more efficient deck. I think that's one of those like gamers are gonna some subset of gamers are gonna min max in that way, even if it's less enjoyable. So we're like, okay, we'll let you recruit that character because you want to hang out with him, but you don't have to play with them in every battle, unless like you can choose whether or not to do that.
Yeah, because I guess in that first version, then like for the randomness of the deal in the battles, like to get your favorite character must have been really much harder to get.
Yeah, and we thought like, yeah, you should just make all of your cards good and able to synergize in interesting ways. You shouldn't be trying to just do this one combo with these two cards or something. But I think at the end of the day, it wasn't actually that people wanted to do a boring strategy. They just wanted it to feel more like other deck builders.
And I guess that's I don't know, a bit of a shame in some ways, isn't it? Because you want to try and do something different.
I think like fundamentally the game is plenty different enough in the mech fantasy really led us to be like, yes, you should be able to change your cards. So, well, by installing mods in them and those abilities, like all the cards start with at least one, sometimes two abilities, and they each have their own health and armor and starting status effects and damage and costs and how much energy they generate. Like they're all somewhat different, but then the abilities make them different. But then when you can add a mod that completely changes a card, like changes what color it uses, what color energy it uses, or makes it so like when they move it they fire, or like those sort of things that would just define a separate card entirely, you can just put onto your mech. And so I think that alone was like a pretty big twist. And that was one that we had to spend a lot of time tweaking, because like if you can put the +5 damage mod on any card, then like that's going to be game breaking on some cards.
Yeah,
And so we
definitely.
had to figure out how to manage that or decide to ignore it. And that felt like a big enough twist, not to mention adding a story, but that felt like a big enough twist that we weren't too worried about how your deck was actually assembled.
How was the process of the mods, and coming up with ideas for them and kind of implementing them into the game?
Just pure fun, really. I think that's like one of the purest forms of game design, where you're just like come up with 100 ideas and then decide which ones you want to do first.
Yeah.
Um, there was the like coming up with a lot of ideas, fairly straightforward. Sort of collecting them into the different factions was then another interesting phase, where like some were fairly straightforward, like the hunters and the suitsmiths were our first two. They were in the demo, and like it's like the hunters are more like single target damage increases. They use marks that increase damage. And a lot of their characters are like, this will be good against a high health enemy that's going to stick around, and you can keep increasing the amount of damage you can do to it. And then the suitsmiths were more defensive, and so they have armor and plating, and like they share armor and they can use armor as bonuses, and that was nice and clear. So there's sort of like collecting your abilities into clusters so you can assign them and find synergies within them. And then there's this phase where you're like, okay, I just want all these cards to interact. You need to have hooks that like are clear things that other cards can react to. And that was the next phase of being like, what are all the triggers, basically? Like when an ally does this, or when an enemy does this, or so and at first you're like, okay, there's like when I move, and then when like I get a kill or something. But then you realize like there are so many different options, and then the abilities can really be based off of those too. Like if I kill a green enemy, it can do something relating to green. And so it was very iterative. And then it like at the end it was like make a third of the cards and mods all at the same time as fast as possible. It was just really fun too, where you're like you have a base, and then you finally realize how to make different cards combo well together.
Mm. Yeah. Like, was there any? Did you come up with any wild mods that you're like, we can't add that into the game? That's too much.
That certainly we had to cut a lot for that reason. And the damage mods, like I mentioned earlier, we were always like, oh yeah, we'll have like +2 damage, +5 damage, a whole bunch of different ones. And it was if a card has a base attack that's really powerful, either because it does a lot of damage or because it's going to hit a lot of targets, it's very easy to make a mod that breaks them. So for instance, Daciana hits all enemy targets. If you give her a damage mod, she's just automatically way better, because instead of it like if you give her +5 damage, instead of doing, she's doing 6 damage instead of 1 damage, she's doing 6 damage to every lane of the game. And that could break the game. So we have to make sure that that doesn't break it too much, or that it has clear negatives, like the enemies with spikes or different types of armor, like deflect, will make that a problem for you. Or enemies that, like, when they die, they spawn like baby cards. Like, those sorts of things have to happen to make sure that she's not too good. And then you have a similar problem, like the relic suits, like Felix's Blue Crest. It starts with a lot of damage, and if you do something like reduce its cost or give it spread attacks so it's hitting multiple targets, it can also sort of create a problem. So a lot of those were like, okay, is this fun? And a lot of times, like, yes, it's fun to make something broken, but if it's breaking it should probably involve other cards doing something interesting. Like, you have to work towards that, not just like, I installed a mod, now I win. And also, can the enemies potentially make this strategy not good in some battles? So you need to think about it instead of just always using the same card the same way every time.
Yeah, it sounds a lot, Tom. My head hurts, let alone what you guys were like. You must have been like dreaming of all this stuff when you were sleeping.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, that's what's fun about games, though. There are times when you have to worry about abilities, and there's times when you need to worry about like voice recording sessions or something, or just like cool things to add to the map, or establishing shots, like, or how we can present the title cards of each episode. And it's good that it was never anyone's job to 100% be making abilities all day.
Eric's back. He's got a question that he wants to know if you have a favorite game mechanic or a design choice that you are most proud of.
I think so. Late in the process, it was clear that we needed some help finishing the game and getting the last like half the mods implemented, and some of the factions, they had like their like first few, like all of them have 5 pilots, and we'd have like 3 pilots we felt pretty good about, and then the other 2 we like hadn't had time to design at all. They might have had art by then, but we didn't have abilities that made sense. So we brought on an incredible designer, Jacob Mooney, who had worked at Magic the Gathering, and he brought such a clarity and just an ability to focus on abilities for a little bit. I think my favorite card tweak that he made right near the end was Jaeger, who's one of the core characters. So he's like in the starter deck. And he has a spread shot, which is just fundamentally interesting because it hits 3 targets instead of just 1. But it never felt like he was really synergizing with other cards. It was like, okay, he's an interesting example of a card who's different from the sort of like the default cards, but he didn't have a neat thing going on. And he was fairly expensive too, because he hits 3 targets. And the tweak that Jacob made was whenever an ally gets a kill, Jaeger's cost goes down by 1. And so that's like such a crystal clear example of the sort of mechanics you want to have, where you don't want to lead a turn with Jaeger. You want to see if you can get some kills. And Jaeger is a blue card. You want to see, like, can I get a kill with a red card so that Jaeger still has energy, or can I get a kill with a blue card that will then, and I wouldn't otherwise be able to afford firing Jaeger second because he is an expensive card. But if I get a kill with another blue card and then that lowers his cost, then I can also fire him. That's sort of like order of operations decision making, where do I want to do this first or do I want to do this first? It's not purely like, look at the amount of energy I have and spend it. you can tweak the amount of energy by generating more during a turn or by lowering costs. That sort of step-by-step thinking where you might know what you want to do, but you also need to consider how you're going to do it. That was sort of like the goal, and that change to Jaeger, making it so that he could reduce his cost when allies get kills, really exemplifies that like philosophy. And it went from like Jaeger's okay to, oh, like this card now fits well with these other cards, and this is so exciting and fun. That was such a great change that he made.
I did like Jaeger as well. He was a cool card, cool character too. What was it like working with him, the guy from Magic the Gathering? Then in general, it must have been quite exciting.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, so Ben and I, the three of us in Trinket, it's always just been the three of us. We're the only employees, but then we bring on a lot of contractors, especially near the end of these projects. We need a lot of artists, and so Ben and I are programmers, and Eric is an artist, and none of us have design training really. By now, I feel like we've gotten a lot better by just doing it. But this was an opportunity to bring someone on who was actually experienced and knew all the words and knew how to make the right spreadsheets to figure out the right things, and how to just a better way of thinking about all of these problems. And that was really wonderful to have someone who knew what they were doing and could talk, like very quickly understand what we were trying to achieve with the game, and then understand how to build on it or make it even better, or work within that system to make a lot of cool things. And it was also just wonderful to have someone who could focus on something where we were just getting pulled in every direction. Like if there's a bug in the tools for some art team member, like we need to fix that immediately or they're not being productive. And but Jacob was able to just focus on making cool cards and mods and playing the game, which it was difficult even in Battle Chef Brigade to play through like an 8-hour game. But once you get to over 15 hours, and like even if you're just skipping every bit of dialogue, it's still a lot of game to play through, and you need to know if it's balanced on hour 12 and that the final boss isn't too hard. And so it was really nice to have someone who was able to do that all day for a period and then make tweaks and be like, yeah, this card is definitely too good or too bad, or like no one is ever going to choose this card. That was just invaluable.
We've talked a lot about, well, we haven't talked, but we've hinted at the characters that you find throughout the game. I really want to know about the characters and how they were created, I guess. And Eric also would like to know this. How did you go about designing that many unique characters? I mean, it must have been a challenge in on itself.
So Eric, our creative director, art director, he was hired at Disney back when we met as a sort of character designer, and I think to him characters just come naturally. But the couple things really helped us. First, the most straightforward one was just like having the concept of factions, and this world where like everyone has a mech really let us focus that down. It's like, okay, this faction makes mechs for this purpose. What kind of characters? And the suitsmiths are an easy example. Like their suits are used to make other suits. And so like Mirabelle has like a giant anvil and a hammer, and she fights with that giant hammer, but she can also like build things with it. So a lot of the like her style, a lot of the suitsmith style is very blacksmithy, sort of big goggle dwarven-y kind of stuff. And then the athletes are completely different. They're more like an F1 racing team, and they've got like sponsors and tighter like athlete suits, and they're sort of like colored like the Power Rangers. Like a lot of those things sort of come out of that. You have a vision for that group. But the other side of that, especially for the core cast, was just the number of iterations the game went through. For a while, one of the stories we were joking about, or maybe I think Eric did mock-ups, was that sort of building off of Battle Chef Brigade, like the ship was going to be like a brewery, and they were making beer and selling beer. So there were characters who were like, their job was to be the accountant for the brewery. And that specific character didn't exactly make it into the game eventually, but sort of morphed into Hanako, who is the first officer and like pilot of your main ship. And so I think some of those some of those inspirations sort of just like kept percolating and getting filtered and reborn. There was a phase where the whole game was just going to be like the part of space they were in. We would like often call it the jungle of space because there's monsters. There's somehow like more energy there. You're closer to the core of the universe. And so there was a period where the concept was it's a jungle of space, so it's going to be like very flower based. Like there'd be planets named after flowers or characters who were very flower inspired. There's still a lot of flower motifs in the game, but it's not as literal. But there were a lot of characters that Eric designed for that phase that then went through, like when you meet Prince Adolphus, there was like a royal bent to a lot of the game in some of the prototypes where we're like, it's fantasy, but in a sci-fi world or vice versa. So we wanted to have like, there are still princes. And so I think there were just so many inspirations. And when you take a long time to design a lot of characters, you can explore so many different ideas, and then they change and get tweaked as they get finalized, but it's just a fun iterative process.
And like Heathcliff, who's like the captain, great name by the way, that name needs to be used more often.
Yeah,
but Heathcliff being the captain, but he was a very laid back kind of easygoing kind of guy. And did you ever want to put a bit more feistiness into him, or was it always the goal to have him that kind of, laid back?
Yeah, he really just materialized that way. And I think that might be sort of there's a lot of reflections of ourselves potentially, and like our own like how we view leadership and how we want to play a game, and whether or not like your boss is a jerk. And so there are some real reflections of that in Jan's crew mission, for instance. Is very much like our writer Emmy Fausti's like experience at previous game studios. I think the decision we made was sort of like we want Heathcliff to be like a fun or not necessarily fun, but a chill, like you're saying, captain. He's like sort of like Picard, sort of like Mal from Firefly, sort of like multiple of the Star Trek captains, but not as intense. And we felt like that was important because he was older and sort of he had tried to retire and just build mech suits. And the twist we made was there are a whole bunch of points in the game when you get to choose, like make captainy decisions about how to handle a situation. And we didn't want it to be like Mass Effect where you're like, are you going to choose the good choice or the evil choice? We wanted the way Megan presented it to us was, how about just flavors of chocolate? You're choosing like, do you want the mocha captain, or do you want the the dark chocolate version? I forget what the other one was. Mint chocolate maybe. But you're going to get he's the same captain, but he's going to react that day in a different way. And it wasn't like you're accumulating like dark chocolate until he does a dark chocolate final thing. It was very much like, we want him, this is a canonical story and he's a canonically good person, but you get to make some choices that twist things a little bit. And see some different things in a given playthrough, but he's not going to go from like evil to nice or something. And I really think that we had this view that we wanted this to be a positive, like enjoyable, somewhat cozy story, even though, universe is ending. But this group, we wanted them to be a fun family. And it's really hard to have you can trauma bond with and hate your evil boss, but we wanted the boss to be an important character that they do bond with as well, because that's sort of who you're playing as. So we didn't want him to feel like you were playing someone you didn't like, or that you would be able to make happy, good choices and not do terrible things to your crew.
What I liked about those choices when they came was that, in some games you get the choices and you make one, and then you make it and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have chosen that one. But you don't get that in Battlesuit Aces. You make your choice and the crew are just like, yeah, okay, cool. And then they kind of crack on and go down that particular path that you've chosen without any kind of repercussions. I really liked that. I thought that was really refreshing to me as a player. It made it less frustrating and restrictive in making me feel like that. It always made it felt like I made the right choice.
I appreciate you saying that, because that was the goal. And it was always a hard thing to figure out whether or not a player should understand what kind of decision they're making, like what's going to happen when I say this thing, or if they even understand, like if they understand the future ramifications, because some of the choices you make have large, like they adjust what episodes are going to be available in that next portion, but it just the level of dynamic dialogue means that it all flows seamlessly anyway, which might mean that someone doesn't realize that they could play a completely different situation and have a completely different battle, or see characters in a totally different order. But I think on the whole, it's better to have just like a really magical playthrough, single playthrough, than be like, oh, I am forced to 100% this game by playing it a whole bunch more times.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. Did you have a favorite character, Tom? Was there one and why was it Daciana?
Daciana is maybe my favorite character. I like that she pulls pranks on the characters, and she's also voiced by Frida Wolf, who was one of the, actually both Mass Effect Andromeda main characters. The twins are Tom Taylorson and Frida Wolf are both in Battlesuit Aces, and I think Frida Wolf does an amazing job taking the like fun way that Daciana talks in the script and then elevating it even farther. And she's just a fun character who gets along. There's sort of the youngins, we call them. Daciana, Jan, and Jaeger are the younger, like rookies, fresh meat on the ship, and they have their own fun relationship together, and teasing other people, or just like bonding over the course of the game. And you find out like their history, and how they're helping each other get through their past. I think Daciana is just like spunky, infectious enthusiasm for what they're doing, makes it really fun. And she's always coming up with wacky mods. She's sort of in charge of that. And like in the demo, she suggests making leg saws, and that's one of the first items you can craft. And it's a really fun item where whenever you move, it shoots, you saw off some of the enemy, do some damage, which feels really good to be translating your movement energy into damage. So I think Daciana, she's probably easy one to go with.
And just to keep with the characters for a little bit more, Tom, and just wondered, like, obviously each character has their own particular skill set with their card and such. And was that a hard thing to design or choose who's going to get who, or did you like chuck them all in a hat and just do a lucky dip?
That was a very hard process, because a lot of times we would design a character, we would design a card, we'd put a character on it somewhat haphazardly because we made so many different prototypes, and we were like, okay, we have like art for this character, we'll just give him this ability. And then as the character evolves and you understand what they're actually into, or what kind of personality they have, like, okay, actually, like this might fit better on this person, or they wouldn't be like a high damage glass cannon or something. We need to tweak that. And that meant that a lot of times I was like, which card is which, and what ability is this, and which card did I actually like? Did I like the character? Or did I like their ability? Why am I choosing them just like without thinking? So that was, especially early on, kind of a weird thing, weird process, because we really wanted you to associate the card with the character and vice versa. So it was something that we kept editing.
On the card, you've got all the different symbols depending on what skill sets and everything. What was the evolution of those? Were they always there?
Yeah, and in fact, there was a period where all the cards had like a basic attack and a special attack, which is kind of why they still say all the passes say special. But during that phase, all of the special attacks were named. So like Jaeger had like spread shot, or like something shotgun, and those would be changing all the time. And there is a lot of phases that the card design went through. The like most obvious way to like lay out a card, like Magic or Hearthstone even, is like you have an illustration, maybe some numbers at the top or the bottom, and then you have like the ability text is in the middle, or like the bottom middle. And we just wanted we wanted the art to be more obvious and stand out and have more space, but also we wanted to have space for the pilot to fit there too, because it's really important that you're like understanding that this is a pilot in a battle suit. We need both illustrations to be on the card. So we really didn't feel like there was space for the ability descriptions to be sitting there all the time. And when you modify a card by installing mods in it, you need to put those somewhere. And maybe they could get jammed in to like just make the description area less readable.
Yeah.
But we slowly over a lot of time moved to more of the tooltip system where you know that there are things, and once you've learned a card you don't need to go check them all the time, but there's like a learning process where sometimes you, especially with new enemies, you need to go check what their ability is, figure it out, then you know what it is for the future. But it was really like we wanted to show the art, a lot of art on each card, and then that encouraged us. I think this was definitely to the better. It encouraged us to make the ability simpler, because you want to have a whole bunch of interesting building blocks that interact and not have like Magic the Gathering style text where it's like 20 keywords to figure out. And so that was a long process of trying to merge together and marry our goals for how the cards would look with the art and their abilities and the combo system across having a whole bunch of cards.
Do you ever get a physical set of cards made?
Not real cards. There's just that paper prototyping stage. And I think some of those index cards probably still are. Like Daciana's card probably is the same. And Jan's card is probably the same. But yeah, we never printed. That's a really good idea. We should do that.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I'll buy a deck. For Eric's last question, he says he seems like there were a ton of voice actors with a huge script. Can you give us an idea of the size of the voice acting dialogue writing project?
Yes, it was enormous and way larger than we should have taken on, and really fun and rewarding, but also terrifying. The script is about 21,000 lines.
Oof.
Or to put it in words for localization, over 150,000 words, which is a lot. That's our writer, Emmy Fauci. Megan worked on Jedi Fallen Order, a AAA game, and it has more like 19,000 lines according to them. So we went above and beyond in making a lot of narrative voice dialogue. A lot of that came out of Battle Chef. Battle Chef was like 96% voiced because the judges were somewhat dynamic, and we didn't feel like recording every possible thing that they could say, but we totally should have. And we were like, our next game, we're going to voice everything. And then we made a game that was like 6 times larger in terms of dialogue. So that was a bit of a nightmare. There was a lot of, we had to do a lot of tools to make sure that all the script lines got into recording scripts. And we had to split up our recordings into 3 phases so that scripts could get done like for an individual session, even if like some other stuff wasn't written in that same scene sometimes, or wasn't finalized for another character that'll be later. That was a complete nightmare, and I never want to do that again. I would like the scripts to be done before we start recording. But that's a lesson learned.
yeah. Unfortunately, you have to go through the rough sometimes to learn those lessons, don't you? But for a minute there, I thought it was like, never again. Our next game's just going to be text, and that's it. We're done.
It's so hard to make a character game that doesn't have a voice for us. When the voices go in, you just can't imagine the characters without that voice anymore. It just seems like that's who they've always been, and it adds so much to their character.
It does, yeah.
And sometimes the voice actors bring something that just goes so far beyond the page that really makes them endearing. Val, for instance, she's like an old woman hunter, and her actor Jessica Strauss just did such a great job giving her this like slower way of talking, this like ferocity that was sort of on the script and sort of in the direction for her, but she just did such a great job. And Val just wouldn't be Val without Jessica Strauss doing an amazing job. So it's so hard to now imagine. It's just like write fewer words. It's still got to be voiced because it's so good.
I mean, as a player, like when you have a game that's fully voice acted, it does make such a difference, especially if it's such a text-heavy game like Battlesuit Aces is. You know, like I played plenty of visual novels where there is no voice acting; you're just reading, and you get tired.
Yep.
Your eyes get tired. It misses an element, I guess, of characterization without those voices, I guess. So I know it's a lot of a pain. It was a lot of hard work for you guys, but it was definitely worth getting through that, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's one other question I want to ask, and that is at the beginning of each mission, you get the Battlesuit Aces logo come up with the name of the episode of the chapter. But then, of course, you have what I came to realize: different voices just going Battlesuit Aces. Tell me the history of this, please, Tom, because it's amazing. It was like one of my favorite parts of the game. I was like, new chapter, new Battlesuit Aces. Here we go.
A lot of time, there were times when we were more. So calling a game episodic is kind of loaded because usually that means like the game is going to come out in multiple parts. But we were like, these are episodes like a TV show, like Star Trek, or like an anime, and. So we would call them missions sometimes, but really we were like, you're going to play an episode of this season of Battlesuit Aces. And having those sort of like cool title card moments is in just a lot of anime. So we felt like we had to. It was like a thing we wanted to do for a long time. But then we realized like there are a lot of places you can put those. Some shows sort of have like a cold open, like something's happening, and then you establish something, and then there's like a break where you're like, oh yeah, I'm playing this game, or I'm watching this episode or this TV show. So we had to figure that out, and then figure out like what it would look like. And humorously, like the logo animation is something that I threw together, and Eric didn't have time to address yet. We'll see if we do a final polish on that at some point. But he was like, this is like pretty good enough to ship. Let's do it. And then at some point, someone was like, we were going to have at least a couple of the main characters record the Battlesuit Aces line. And then we're like, wait, we should put this on every actor's session to make sure that we have a whole bunch of them. There are a few that when that decision was made, I don't think we have, or they were hard to find in their 4-hour session. But I think we have almost all of the like characters you can collect and some of the villains. And those, so if you're doing like a certain crew member's mission, it'll be them saying it. If you're doing a faction mission, it'll be like one of the characters that will later be unlocked or that features in that mission, like Mirabelle or Falcon can say the first Suitsmith faction missions, like episode intro. And then sometimes just random amongst the cards you have. And we thought that was pretty fun. There are some cards, some characters. Ayana in the Enigmas faction is like extremely chill or just doesn't even want to be there. And she's like, exactly. Battlesuit Aces. And that gets a laugh out of everyone. And it's like so perfect. And you're only going to see it if you have Ayana or possibly if you play that Enigmas mission. So like there's just like sort of a magic to letting the actors show off. And it's like unexpected and just fun.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, how they reacted to being asked to do that, because they must have gone to town on it.
Yeah. If you tell them like figure out how to say this in your way, they have a lot of fun, get a lot of different takes.
What's next for Trinket Studios? What kind of crazy genre mashups have you cooking up over there at the moment?
We have not figured out what crazy genre mashup we'll do next. But because for now we're focused on continuing to build Battlesuit Aces, there are some clear areas we want to expand for players to be announced at some point. But like we've built such a rich set of cards and characters that we don't want to just walk away from them. And we've got a few other things cooking related to our all of our games. And then we got to figure out what to make next. It'll be fun, whatever it is, fun and painful. That's the way it goes.
Will there be DLC for Battlesuit Aces?
For a long time we were like, yes, because we failed at that for Battle Chef Brigade. We had started planning things, and then our publisher at the time, Adult Swim Games, sort of imploded, and that sort of made it impossible to continue with DLC for Battle Chef Brigade. And so it was always part of our plan for Battlesuit Aces. We ended up rolling so much content into the main game, and given the pain of voicing new story, it's a tricky thing to figure out. So we don't want to just be like, oh, like you can have the character, you pay $5 and the characters can wear a different costume or something. Like that's never appealed to us.
Yeah.
So we've been thinking about the right thing, but for now we're focusing on just expanding the game, making it better for free. That was sort of something we did with Battleship Brigade. We had the deluxe edition, which added local multiplayer and another chef and a whole bunch of other sort of metagame features, and just made the game better overall. So for now, we're focused on that sort of thing, like just make the game better. Because like I said much earlier, so many of the players of Battlesuit Aces have yet to play it. They'll be coming down the line, and we want them to have an amazing experience and have an opportunity for current players to hop back in and enjoy it again their way.
I've been wondering since I completed the game on how intricate it was to include all the different mechanics that was running through the game, and it was fascinating to hear how it was all achieved. A huge thank goes to Tom for spending some of his time to talk with me. It was a real honour to have him on the podcast. If you'd like to keep up to date with Tom, you can find him on BlueSky, and the best way to keep up with Trinket Studios is by visiting their website or their Discord server. You can find links to the game's Steam page and to the Discord and Tom's BlueSky all in the show description. Don't forget to check out somanygames.co.uk for our latest reviews, articles and interviews, including the first of many monthly articles from Gaming in the Wild's John Rogers. And stick around to the very end of the outro of this podcast to catch some messages from some of our fellow creator friends. Thank you for listening, and until next time, please take care out there and happy gaming.
Need a little something to help you relax or unwind? Step in a Chillscape, a pocket dimension of relaxing video game music. I'll curate the best playlists with the coziest themes and soundtracks, perfect to study, de-stress, or stare at the ceiling to. Tune in wherever you listen to podcasts, or head to chillscape.xyz for more info. New episodes every other Wednesday. And remember, vibe responsibly.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.